A critical overview of life in Buddhism by Venerable Rungruan Papa Saro, Dr. Rungruan Lim Chu Patapa. The Dharma means the nature. When the Buddha decided to search for the meaning of life, in this context it means he was looking for specifically the truths of life living in nature as the truths of life within nature, which was the part of the Dharma as well. And when he gained an enlightenment, then he discovered the truths of life within nature. And after then when he started teaching the public on this truths of life within nature as the Buddhism, then the Buddha's teachings were called the Dharma as well. And since the concept of nature in the ancient time was very vague and unclear, therefore when he referred something as a part of nature, in this circumstance he used the word element as for comparison to physical element in nature. On the day of the Buddha enlightenment, he discovered that everything and every phenomena were under the law of nature, so-called ithapaichayata, that whatsoever happening in the world and universe were caused by certain cause and effect. And by making an observation of the mechanism of the law of nature, we could summarize that everything and every phenomena shared the three common characteristics in nature, that is, impermanence, deteriorating, and no self. And in view of how a life interacting with the nature, this cause and effect driving all beings was called karma, and as a result could conclude that all beings were under the law of karma as well. Every being exists as a life. A human being acts as a life which is composed of two parts, the body and mind. Every being will be born to be alive for a certain period, then passing away. A life after death is an intermittent condition when a being still struggling to exist without the part of body, so-called a spirit. And as a new form of body is regenerated as part of the reproduction process in nature, a spirit will be reborn with a compatibility form of body to the spirit in the reincarnation process as the circle of life. All beings are born and died like the circle of water cycle in nature. Although a life is very complicated system, but we can define a life in terms of component-based system as the five aggregates of being, that is, body, feeling, perception, volitional formations, and consciousness. In addition, a life also can be viewed in terms of processing-based system as the process of dependent origination, that is, consciousness, name and form, six sense bases, contact, feeling, craving, clinging, existence, birth, aging and death, ignorance, volitional formations. In Buddhist study, we will investigate the life in terms of individual phenomenon of the five aggregates of being in a functional analysis, and then extending the study into collective phenomena in terms of dependent phenomena of the process of dependent origination in a structural analysis to contemplate on the truths of life within nature. A life is just a natural process of being starting with receiving stimulus from the world, then having a consciousness fetching the arriving signal, then having a feeling to make an immediate instinct response to the environment, then having a perception to make a more understanding of the world. However, this initial process mistakenly struggles with craving by assuming a self to be involved with the matter with desire and lust, then the mind processing is dominated by the five aggregates with subject to clinging, then the mind mixes the matter with memories of latent dispositions with ignorance in volitional formations, making the matter to become more complicated in the process of dependent origination before bursting out into action responding to the world. In a detailed study on the mind, the Buddhism views the mind as a stream of consciousness with a consciousness as a part of processes, and yielding a particular mental factor as a part of the series of states of mind. In this mechanism of consciousness, the mind will fetch a stimulus as the object of consciousness, then reflecting a mental factor, and then responding by inducing a next process along the pathway to cause a next consciousness as a part of the stream of consciousness associated with a series of mental factors, thus constituting a mind processing within the mind. In an insight observation, when saying seeing a phenomenon in a phenomenon, it implies having a mindfulness to be aware of what is happening inside the mind. That is, when having a consciousness, the mind will fetch a mental object which can be either a stimulus from the world as an external object of consciousness, or an internal generated mental object from volitional formations as an external object of consciousness. And once the mind absorbed the object of consciousness, then the mind will respond with the associated state of mind like a mental behavior of an individual, which is called a mental factor. Therefore, when the mind executes as a stream of consciousness, then the mind will respond with a series of associate mental factors, which we can observe these collective dependent phenomena as a mind processing, then by having a purified mindfulness to observe and to contemplate the changing processes and states of mind, and then the truths of the process of dependent origination are revealed. This is a Buddhist way to gain the wisdom on the truths of life within nature. In Buddhism, a person will be good or bad depending on how the mind function. What we all are suffering are in fact a matter of how the mind is processing in a right or wrong pathway in responding to the world. This problem in life starts by ignoring the truths of life within nature, and mistakenly assuming that there is a self to be pleased with sensual pleasure within the process of dependent origination. This dysfunction of mind processing causes a minor contaminant arising in the mind, so called the finest defilement of the taints. And as the mind keeps on thinking in volitional formations in relation with the taint in the process of dependent origination, the problem is escalated into the middle defilement of the 5 lower fetters, and finally the rough defilement with greed, hatred, and delusion before busting out into action responding to the world. In Buddhism, an undeveloped mind is a kind of mind with an uninstructed cognition that ignores the truths of life within nature. And then, when the mind receives stimulus from the world, the mind creates defilements of contaminants inside the mind processing, before busting out with wrong action responding to the world. All kinds of suffering in life is caused by the wrong actions to the world. The goal of Buddhism is to eliminate all kinds of defilements by performing an insight observation in the Buddhist practice to see the Dharma of the truths of life with nature as they really are, to initiate the cognitive process development to gain wisdom, and after then, the mind will be able to apply this wisdom of instructed cognition to liberate the mind by wisdom. This is a way to liberate the mind and to make an end to suffering in life. The Buddhism is based on facts and science, and it has nothing to be against with any belief of anything including supernatural powers, spirits, or gods. Also, the Buddha did not want to dominate the world with an empire of Buddhism. The Buddha wanted to share this knowledge of the truths of life within nature, the Dharma, to resolve the problem in life.